Minecraft broke my previous automatic resin farm, so I designed this new one. Hello there, Ray here, and if you guys haven't seen my previous video where the new snapshot actually changed how my old resin farm works, now the water won't come through and wash off all the resin, so essentially it doesn't work, which means we gotta say goodbye to this simple design and go back to a little bit more complicated design. It's not much more complicated than the previous one. We do lose a little bit on the rates, but it does work with the newest nerf. So let me quickly explain what we actually want to get out of the resin farm and what are the different requirements for the farm in order for this to be accomplished. So first up, we're trying to farm up the new resin clumps, which you can turn into the resin blocks. These are instant mine blocks, so you can place them down and break them like slime and honey. Really good for scaffolding or for temporary blocks during building. You can also see you can use them in making bricks, which can make all these different types of brick blocks. Looks very similar to other types of bricks in the game, except they got this lovely orange color. Of course, the resin clumps themselves can also be added as layers onto previous blocks, so you can make like new textures similar to the sculk veins. So how we actually get the resin is that every time we hit one of these guys here, they will spawn in resin associated to the hearts that they have. So each of these guys come from one of these creaking hearts, and if you hit the guy that goes to the certain heart, it will spawn in resin within about 2 blocks of the actual heart that it owns. Now each guy can produce between 2 resin or 3 resin. So to make sure my farm produces the maximum amount of resin per each creaking heart, came in here and I got in 3 logs, as resin will only generate on top of these logs and not on the side of the walls or anything like that. So this one heart can do up to 3 spots like this, and the next one could do the same thing. And then I got the same thing going over here where these guys can each put in 3 resin, and that way I can get the maximum amount of resin for this area here. Now before, we would just release the water here and the water would come through and break up all the resin and drop it as items, but that got nerfed just this last snapshot. So what we gotta do first is we got to break them off by using my previous design, which I made for the bedrock edition, and that is actually shifting the logs. So we have some pistons here. They're going to push all these logs over this direction, and this is going to break off the resin. And we can actually see this in action here. See, it shifted, broke it all off, and then what we're doing is a short period afterwards we are releasing the water. So to get the maximum use out of the water, water can flow a total of 8 blocks before it has to go down a layer. So I designed my farm so the water can reach the full 8 blocks, which does limit to how wide we can make this. We also have the same limitation when it comes to pistons, as they can only push 12 blocks, so that's the maximum amount they can push right here. In between these 2 limitations, this is how big of a spawning platform we can use in order to collect the resin. But as mentioned earlier, we only get resin if we actually hit these creaking mobs. So these guys need to be in a location where we can hit them all at once. And that's why I actually have this little chamber down here. We're going to wash all these creakings over here, and the player is going to be whacking at them to produce the resin up above. But in order to get these creakings in the first place, they spawn so many blocks away from their actual heart that they are connected to. And that's another reason why we have this big surface area here, is when there's no water here, then the creakings can spawn in. Let me go ahead and just despawn all these guys. So now that they all despawn, you can see as soon as I come within range of the hearts, they're going to try to spawn these guys onto a full top surface block. And since I got the rest of the farm all slabbed up, they can't spawn on that, and they won't spawn in the water. So we have to remove the water every once in a while so that we can get them to come into the game. But you can see the water is also useful in moving them towards their killing chamber, which is going to be right there. We don't actually kill them, but we do need to attack them with our sword. So I actually have the water do 2 things: washes off the resin clumps and also moves all these creakings to the center. Now you can see they're not moving to the center too well, and that's because we would typically be down here in survival. And when you're in survival looking towards their direction, they are going to go ahead and freeze. And when they freeze, they don't collide with each other, they don't push each other, they don't walk around. This makes it really easy to get them all into this killing chamber here. Now once again, we're going to use a sword so we get to the sweeping ability, and this means that if I hit one of them, it's actually going to hurt all the nearby creakings as well. Every time we hit these guys, it's going to produce the resin on top, and then it's going to get washed into the center. You can see these guys stacked in really nicely once I went to survival mode. But the thing is, Creakings only produce resin every 5 seconds, so they have like a little cooldown period. So what I got over here is a clock that will activate every 5 seconds. And I'm using this trapdoor as an indicator to tell the player when to click. And what you do is you get an auto clicker, you set it to around 5 seconds, and as soon as you hear this trapdoor flick, you would turn it on. And now it will automatically click every 5 seconds. You can get the maximum amount of resin per hour. Now in single player you don't really have a problem with a desync between the player clicking and the game operating. But this could be a problem in multiplayer servers. Just because in real life 5 seconds elapsed doesn't mean that the game thinks that 5 seconds has elapsed. This is because the game can slow down over time if it's having trouble keeping up with everything that's going on in it. And that's the nice thing about the clock. You can come in here, you can make the clock slower. And this is the easiest solution to avoid the latency problem. It's just by attacking them not 5 seconds exactly, but a little bit longer than 5 seconds. That way the game is running a little bit slow. You can kind of adjust for that. Now we'll come in with a system in the future for people that want to attack the mobs. And then only after attacking them will the whole system then flood the area as well as break off the clumps. The advantage of this type of system is that you don't have to try to get your player clicking to be exactly like your clock over here. Rather, you clicking becomes the clock. But some of you guys actually thought this would fix the problem with TPS, or ticks per second, being slower on servers. But it doesn't actually fix the problem. That's because when you click, let's say you're clicking every 5 seconds, the game still cannot accept those 5-second clicks if it's running slow. No matter if you click with the player, you use a player as a clock, or if you use the redstone as a clock. The nice thing about the redstone is that it will always be consistent with the server. So if you set this to 5 seconds, if the game is running slow, this will just run slower. And you can still time your clicks based off of when this trapdoor opens. You're just going to have to adjust your auto clicker to kind of stay in sync with however much TPS loss is occurring on the server. But like I said, on single player you really don't have to worry about this. Overall the design, it works pretty simple like the previous one. We have a clock that's going in a circle. Every once in a while it will activate. This will push a piston and observer up, which will send a redstone line to either side. Now both sides are mirror of each other. This just doubles the amount of spawning spaces and then doubles the amount of resin per hour. Now this signal is going over and to these pistons over here. First thing it's doing is it's pushing all these logs over to the opposite side. The resin will spawn, it's going to push it over first, and then we're going to wash it. The way we're washing it is that we're then taking the same signal, running it through a little bit of delay, we're inverting it, and then we're releasing the water on top of this. Simple setup with some trapdoors and waterlogged, and that just comes through and washes everything. So if the items are here, you can see it breaks off, and then they get pushed in front of the water, and they end up in this water stream, and they get washed down there. Now before I show you where the resin goes, there is a little bit of complication as we do need to reset these logs back into their original location. So we've seen how those pistons push the logs this way. Now we need a different set of pistons to push them back. Now the problem is I'm trying to use the maximum 12 block push limit. This means I don't really got a lot of options when it comes to detecting this log and pushing it back. And I have even less options when I decided to try to remove this spawning area for the resin. You can see this area here is open to air, and resin can spawn on any logs that are open to air that are near the heart, including this side here. Now on all the other sides I just came in and blocked them off so that we don't get resin in really weird locations that we can't easily collect. And that's why I chose just to collect it from the top of the surface, because it's really easy to collect it there. But then I had this idea, what if I just have water come in here and occupy this space, which is really easy to do. And since there's water here, the resin won't spawn on the side of these blocks. That's all good and dandy, but then how in the world am I supposed to detect when this log comes over to this position? Can't just use like a torch underneath, and I can't put like a redstone block in there. So what I end up doing is pushing a redstone signal into this log here, and then that log is going to power this note block, and then the note block is updating this piston, which is getting powered diagonally through quasi connectivity. And then this piston will update and move this observer over, putting a pulse in here. This pulse goes over top of these pistons and we'll actually update them, and they'll extend very briefly, pushing all the logs back to the opposite side. This was a bit cheaper than running some redstone signal all the way over here and powering this side, and it is also kind of like a smart system, as it only pushes when the logs actually come over. This also helps fill in this gap. You notice over here there is a gap, so when this gets pushed over, we don't want those items to fall in the gap. We don't want the creakings to fall in the gap. Creakings can fall in there, but they'll just swim back up again in the water, and they'll eventually come over here. And I also build up the sides so that the items don't get like popped off and end up on the edges here. And then when the resin does break off, you can see it's gonna get washed over here and wash down this hole here. And then we have some hoppers and some soul sand with the hoppers underneath, picking up all the items, and they're pushing them into some crafters. Then I decided to automatically just craft them down into the blocks, as you can convert the blocks back into the clumps at any moment. So all these crafters are being powered, and they're crafting stuff down, and then they're eventually drop them into this water stream and into this chest here, where we can get tons and tons of resin blocks. So with this many spawning spaces and running it every 5 seconds, it'll produce 86,000 resin clumps per hour. But as soon as it turns to daytime, these creakings will just vanish. So you can't run the farm in the daytime, meaning the rates are cut in half, which means this farm will still produce over 43,000 clumps per hour. This is a decrease from my previous design, which was producing around 58,000 per hour and was even simpler, as you can see. So the nerf, it did hurt the rates, and it hurted the size as well as the complexity of the farm. Overall, for how much it produces per hour, I'd say the design is still quite simple. And that's why the flowing water is important, because as soon as it turns nighttime again, you can just continue to AFK it, and the farm will automatically start up again by recollecting all the creakings, so that you can whack them with your sword once again without you having to do anything special. Now, one of the most common questions I get from you guys is, how do I design these farms? Well, you guys can actually watch me design all my farms live over here at my Twitch live streams, and I do the designing also on my testing server, which the server is open to all my viewers. You guys can just hop on with IP that's on my Discord and see all the different builds on here, and even spectate me as I design this on my live streams. I do stream every Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, and you can see I not only designed this, but also came up with a new design that I was initially going to show you guys, but there is a current bug with this one, where I was hoping to have the creaking, instead of getting washed to the center, just have them pathfind over top of these trapdoors. But you can see there is a problem. When they come on top of this, they just end up spinning in circles. So if you guys want to help me get this fixed so that I can make an even simpler version of the resin farm, then I need you guys to go in the description and upvote this bug, which I made a bug report on. Otherwise they would just walk down, then we just have a big collection of water, and then I could just shift these little columns back and forth in order to knock off all of the resin, and it would be much simpler than that setup. So make sure you guys are subscribed so you don't miss out on more future designs, as I will also be doing a block by block tutorial, plus the world download and a schematic of the build. So make sure you check the description of this video to find the newest link to the newest design that works. But I'll only do that once I'm sure that Mojang doesn't nerf the farm once again, so probably closer to the full release. So leave a like on the video and come watch my live streams, and I'll see you guys all over there. Bye bye!